Hey there, and welcome to Google's Innovation for the Nation 2013. I'm Christopher Dorobek, anchor and managing editor of GovLoop's Dorobek Insider, an online program and blog that focuses on 6 words, helping you do your job better. And that's exactly what we're focused on here today. We're helping you do your job better. And we're doing that by introducing you to the government transformers. I know it sounds like a Hollywood movie, but it's actually people out there who are figuring out how to get the job done in what are challenging times. And we're going to talk about empowering employees with the power of context. We all need that, right? The real power of information. As we continue in our Hangout, we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions or comments, there are 2 ways you can reach us. You can submit questions right here in the virtual conference center. Visit the networking lounge within the event, and then go on the Ask a Question button. You can do that, or you can tweet us. Use our hashtag IFTN 2013, Innovation for the Nation 2013, or you can tweet me directly at @CDorobek, and we'll answer as many questions as we can as we move forward. And there will also be an opportunity to actually chat with our speakers. We'll tell you more about that later on. And my goodness, we've had some great conversations today. We talked about mobility and security. We've talked about using search to find needles in haystacks, your own haystacks. We spoke to the National Archives about their process of moving to a collaboration platform. Great stuff there. And we discussed automating performance reviews. I know all 3 of those words together sound really boring, but really, really cool stuff. And talk about making lives easier on everybody. How awesome. If you missed any of these discussions, they're all online. You can find them all, you can watch them on demand on Google Federal's YouTube page. And if you registered, which is how you're here, we'll send you the link so you can find it nice and easy. But let's talk about that context, the power of information. Joining us is Marie Kennedy. She is with the San Diego Fusion Center. She was formerly with the Joint Task Force Homeland Defense. Marie, did I get all that right?
Correct.
Oh, good. I'm glad. She was in Hawaii. She's now in San Diego, so clearly she takes all the rough assignments, but she does amazing stuff, and so she gets to live in marvelous places. Also joining us is Mike Evanoff. He is a Google spatial engineer. And Mike, I'm going to hand things off to you.
Okay. Well, I work for the Google Federal team, and we work trying to get Google Earth and Google Maps and other geospatial products deployed and functioning into the federal government. And I think today we're going to be talking about Google Earth Enterprise, Google Earth Portable, Google Earth Pro, and how Marie and her team use that in low bandwidth environments, challenging situations, in order to provide a good geospatial context to some of the operations that they had in the Pacific Theater. And so I know that Marie has some demos and some explanations. So with that, we can turn it over to Marie and let her kind of describe what she used it and how well it worked and how she was able to deploy it through her organization.
Sure thing, Mike. Thank you so much. Yeah, so to begin a little bit here and discuss the Homeland Defense mission and the Pacific Theater. So Joint Task Force Homeland Defense concerns the domestic portions of U.S. Pacific Command's area of operations. And so this Homeland Defense mission concerns the domestic Hawaii, Guam, Northern Marianas, America, and Samoa, some other smaller islands, and as well as the compact nations of Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. Those nations have a particular special relationship with the United States. And so this Homeland Defense mission has 3 primary parts of it: civil support, Homeland Defense, and then there's pandemic influenza and other biothreats that happen to be very similar to any type of pandemic issue. Now, civil support happens to be the largest mission because it happens the most often. Many tsunami responses, as we're all familiar with, have happened across the Pacific region over the past, well, since we've been gauging tsunami responses, but we've been very well aware of them in the past few years, especially with the Japan earthquake in March 2011, as well as the Chilean earthquake in 2010. But one thing I really wanted to mention that makes this particular mission unique is that the DoD is generally foreign focused, right? And so for the Pacific Command itself is foreign focused. It's much like normal, like Southcom, CENTCOM, EUCOM. And so to have a homeland mission as part of a command that tends to be homeland focused, it requires a special handling of data, special mission set. It's like having a very, very large corporation and almost need this tiny team that does something almost completely opposite in a way. And this is appropriately so, because any type of military action on a U.S. property concerning U.S. citizens, there are specific rights that the citizens maintain, especially concerning privacy at all points in time. And so we had to learn how to appropriately work with all of our partners to be able to really ensure the protection of the data. And also, really challengingly for the DoD is to be able to work in a more open but still sensitive context. And that was kind of what made the made Joint Task Force Homeland Defense, and then and now still the Homeland Defense mission with USPCOM, so unique.
And that seems to be across government, the ability to share with others and the ability to have different people providing their data into a common environment seems to be a challenge across government, but I'm sure it's even more acute for the military trying to reach out to civilian agencies.
Definitely so, and this is it's hard for all civilian agencies, and then especially for the DoD, who normally doesn't necessarily have to handle communication that way, right? And so what you have is a whole well, I'd say there's a 500,000 active duty army alone, right? So you have multiple millions of people who are used to being able to communicate, who are very trained and used to being able to be effective, but only in certain areas of life, and not in a civilian environment. And so that was the trick that we had to make happen, was taking these people and the skills and the tools concerning all these other parts of the world and to be able to use it in a domestic environment.
And Marie, part of the challenge here is getting the right information into the right hands at the right time, and that's not easy. I mean, it's using the phrase is easy, but actually doing it is very complex, isn't it?
Correct. And knowing the caveats of what particular information can go to who and to whom, and the timing is both the partner and the timing are both crucial, and that's because working in a civilian in a domestic environment is only allowed under specific situations and under specific authorities and missions. So for an example, in a disaster declaration has to be made in order to provide certain levels of DoD support. And a disaster declaration can happen before an event, it can happen after. It really depends on how well your partners are anticipating and trained and interested to enact that type of authority and support for service.
So can you talk a little bit about how essentially this is collaboration at its core? This is really sharing information, because oftentimes we can have one piece of information in our left hand that the right hand needs, and if they're not working together, if you're not collaborating and sharing information in a core way, a safe way, I guess, what are some of the big challenges of doing that?
Well, the word safety, you just hit it right there. Like that's the first aspect from a security perspective that we always have to ensure is the transmission of this data going to be safe whenever I hand it over to my partner? And likewise, not just is it going to be safe with them, but can I guarantee that trust and that relationship with my partner that when they share information with me, I am also going to treat it with that same level of safety.
Right.
And that right there, that was actually a huge reason why we ended up going with the Google Earth environment for the demonstration I'll speak to later. It was because we needed to ensure that our partners knew exactly how we were handling the files, how we were storing them, how we were going to be accessing them, and then likewise, we were sharing back out. We all had to have an agreement about that safety concerning the data.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that demonstration? Do that demonstration right now so we can sort of see, I think it will help us see what you're talking about a little bit.
Sure thing. One second. And just got a Gmail notification, so it's taking up my screen. Okay, so let's jump to the demonstration. Yeah, and so what this concerns is the National Special Security Event for the Asia Pacific Economic Committee 2011 Senior Leaders Meeting. And in 2011, this took place in Hawaii. And so this was the first time the U.S. has hosted this event. So it was pretty significant. We had 21 world leaders, three of them including the presidents of the United States, as well as Russia and China. So anytime you have that many world leaders together in the same space at the same time, there's a tremendous amount of impacts concerning ensuring that nothing bad happens. And so the the DoD supported lead federal agencies in this particular mission, and so in the support, the DoD established what they call a dual status command. And that dual status command, we all worked together across the active duty and the National Guard, created a group called Joint Task Force Kupa'a. And this right here demonstration visualizes the basic overview, the basic planning. We had two areas of operation that we had to deal with, both the Halikoa, which I'm going to actually point this out a little bit because that's not a common term, Halikoa and the Ihilani. And what was unique about this is that we actually had two different areas. The Halikoa was the special area concerning missions, authorities, rights, and execution on one day. And the Ihilani was the same special area, but on a separate day. So we had changing boundaries depending upon the day. But luckily we were able, we gathered our baseline, here's a basic plan, and we just kept building our information. So not only your plan data, we start moving into now.
So we don't actually see the demo.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. Thank you then. Okay, I appreciate it. I have a hard time. Well, let me explain a little bit more first.
Let me just butt in. They can see it. You can't, Mike. So
okay.
You're fine.
I'm special. All right. Sorry for that. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. That's okay. And so what I was describing here is, and obviously I had a lot more data than I'm showing in this view. This is, by the way, this is the view that the United States Army Pacific did request for me to, that I delivered last year at AUSA. So all of this data is cleared for, for public sharing, and so it does need to be at that level. But to go back, so we're still working with our same data sets, our same planning areas. What's the restricted maritime zones, and what's the issues where we're going to have with parking? Who are our partners, and what are their constraints and information? And so that helps out on all the planning processes. So the next big part of it, of course, concerns not only what is our planning, but now what's happening. So during our event, our common operational picture, we always ensured that the data about what was happening was visible and upfront. And I mean, this is this seems pretty obvious, right? I mean, and all of this has our basic information: what's happened, what's the current status, is something still a problem, is it closed, who's reported it, when did it happen? And then we arranged our information day by day. And so as you needed, you could always look to see that more has happened, but usually we kept it down to the last 24 hours. And yeah, it doesn't actually, this is not necessarily that high-tech of a solution in some ways. And we definitely had all of our partners using Blue Force tracking and sharing, including the military, the Honolulu Police Department, as well as our special agency support. And what we did is we made an agreement for sharing parts of our data. And the best way to put that is within the DoD had 99%, everyone had the same COP. And that right there is pretty significant. The same view that I was showing at JTF Kupa'a for the dual status commander was the exact same view that was at USPACOM headquarters on their Joint Operational Center, their knowledge wall. For the J00 was the same exact picture that was being shown at Joint Task Force Homeland Defense Operational Center. It was the same picture, 99% across all DoD. And there's only that 1% exception if it concerns personnel that involve members of the team. And then, probably even, so that itself is pretty substantial.
Not
Beyond
pretty
that,
substantial. That's humongous.
yeah, well, and also this was all in a sensitive unclass environment, so we had to have very special ways that we were handling this, and that's yeah. Um, and then on top of that, we had 80% same data being shared with all of our local, state, and other government partners.
Mm.
And so that's really where it starts to be like, wow, like our city, luckily we have a great relationship with the city and county of Honolulu. And so we were sharing our data and data services back and forth, ensuring that they could visualize the data on their picture, and likewise, we could take their data and visualize it on ours. With the special DHS needs, we could provide the data, and then they would do things that they needed to do. And then likewise, what that did is built the trust that they would share back with us. So it created, once again, that word of safety, right? It created that sense of knowing that everyone was going to be handling the data appropriately, which is very complex in this type of environment, and needing to share it with that many different partners.
All you need is one bad apple to ruin that sense of trust and safety, right?
Well, that's true, and that's always true, right? I mean, that's very prevalent in our any system that we have nowadays. And so, luckily not luckily, this is real. How do I put this? We had lots of experience through other events that we had already established that trust and rapport. Anything since the American Samoa tsunami response in September of 2009 to briefing the United States Army Chief of Staff, General George Casey, at 2 a.m. in the morning after the Chilean earthquake in 2010. Like, we had already been doing this a few times. Yeah. And but we had never done it at this scale. I mean, 21 world leaders is a whole different thing. And moving boundaries, right? It's a different thing.
That's the major leagues. You're no longer in the kiddie league. You're in the major leagues now. Mike, I want to. It almost, as I'm listening to Marie talk about this, we've almost like crossed a place where it's easier in some ways to, at least technologically, to share information, to get it out there, than almost, and we've seen that in all sorts of situations. And so you have to almost think about what's right to share, what's not right to share. It almost has to be part of the mindset going in, isn't it?
Yeah, and certainly the system needs to be designed around that. And it's getting a lot easier than it used to be. Now we have a lot of cloud-based applications where you can serve the data off a server. We have user authentication, things like that. So, it used to be much harder, where each organization would have to set up their own security and pass out passwords and worry about firewalls. So now with a lot of the common operational picture and firewall and internet-based products we have, it's a lot easier to do that. One thing I wanted to ask Marie is, usually if you were to tell me that you're going to roll out a geospatial common operational picture across state, local, military, there would be a huge training effort as well. You'd have to show everybody how to use it, and it would take you 2 weeks to get them to learn how to use it. What was your experience with, actually training the people up to use this system?
Well, having the events that happened previously, we did already have a pretty good baseline of core, especially reservists. The reservist and the guard, we already had a working relationship where people already knew how to use the tool. Otherwise, we did a two-part on this. What we did do is that anyone who actually just wanted to see the view and didn't need to really investigate the data, we also kept the Google Earth View window hosted inside an Adobe Connect room. And in that room, we had a chat and then points of contact, hot links, and so forth. That was a process that we mimicked actually off of one of our partners out here in California. And so that was actually very, very helpful for people who, geospatial isn't their bailiwick. I can speak about shapefiles and importing CSVs and KMZs all day long, and they should never know what that means, right? And I mean, especially when you're dealing with 2 stars on an hourly basis, right? This was the level we were working at, and so we didn't want everyone to have to learn how to use the tool. And so we always kept that room up and available. It was up 24/7 throughout the whole event and before and after. We always would move the view to answer anyone's question, what have you. And then outside of that, though, we did have a core team at each individual operations center who had primary contributions. We did have people who were trained about how to create the data, submit it, and then we had a formal approval process for creating what I call the master file. That master file was very, very, about 3 of us who actually had authoring rights, and we would have let a couple other, but we never had to. We were the ones who actually created the master files, and those were the ones that were shared out amongst the partners. Now, the master files had a lot of data feeds in them that we had no control over, right? And NGA contributed a very, very significant component to this, and they had their own system, so that feed was just part of the master file.
And I suppose most of your end users are already accustomed to using Google Earth or the internet-based tools anyway, so they probably pick it up pretty quick.
Exactly. And actually, well, you can't show everything, right, in an hour. And so what we did too is we made versions of this data, and we made a completely unclassed, completely open file. If people did want to just open it up on their phone, on their Google Maps on their phone, or anywhere else. So we did anticipate different levels of use, different needs, working in different environments. And that really helps because a lot of people would take it back to their office, or they knew they could have it on their mobile phone just in case. So it's very helpful.
We're running out of time, and I want to ask both of you a question. This is a fairly unique use of this kind of technology, and yet as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the uses and all the federal agencies that use geospatial data in some way, shape, or form in all sorts of different ways. It certainly may not have the kind of security implications that the data you're dealing with does, but there's and maybe I'll ask Mike first. Mike, as you were working on this, as you're thinking about this, are there lessons that USDA, that Census, that other agencies can take from the remarkable work that they've done?
Well, I think traditionally, as geospatial systems evolved, they started out as like a little stovepipe system because computers weren't very powerful, and it took the whole computer to create just a couple layers. But now, we've moved so far beyond that, and the idea of having like a single stovepipe GIS system is becoming just antiquated. There's so many things that can be done on cloud platforms and collaboration today that were just impossible. So I think we're just seeing an incredibly rapid pace of change, and it's really especially around collaboration and sharing of data rather than having your data stovepipe. So I'm hearing that same message from Marie as well on her data. It's the realm of the possibility. Almost the possibilities now are almost limitless about what you can do with this kind of data. Yeah, and the data is really only valuable if people are using it. It's no good when it's on a CD in your drawer. So
right.
The ability to take it out and share it with others, and with secure sharing and the ability to control access. But I think that's been the real change over the last few years in geospatial.
Marie, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the collaboration side, because I've been preaching for years that the real power of information does come when it's shared, and that's when amazing things really do happen. And talk a little bit, that sounds like what you guys have learned.
Oh, exactly. The ability to share our data, of course, nowadays with the network links and data services, it's so huge, it's primary, it's almost an automatic. And then you have the actual sharing of data in disks in the drawer and so forth, as Mike was referencing. One of the key components that I find that makes collaboration most successful is the ability for users to actually work with the data a little bit first. A user for any particular organization, they're sitting at their computer screen, whether it's an analyst or someone who's in an operations center or someone who's making a decision. They're sitting in front of their computer first. They need to at least massage the data just a touch before they kind of understand it. And then once they've done that, then that can go back into a partnership and sharing. That's really the key. I think that that really made what we did in the National Special Security event different, and that each individual user could go through and actually tailor their view to what they specifically needed, and see how that worked. And then if it was useful and effective and then vetted, and whatever that organization's process was, then that could be shared out and become part of the exchanged information for the whole.
And again, that right piece of information, sometimes one of the challenges, I think one of the erroneous things that often happen is somebody elsewhere would decide what the right piece of information for that person was. And now we found that, guess what, those people we have tools that can allow people to find the information that they need that helps them do their job. It's a very different mindset, isn't it?
Completely.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes that person creating it. And a lot of data is then you and I talking right here, right now, right? And so someone may want to go out and just talk with somebody and then put that into a report, and that report goes into a has a geospatial location, right?
Yeah.
And that seems so antiquated, but honest to goodness, just empowering people to do that, that's what's been so amazing whenever it works.
And as I was reading about your case study and as you've been talking, it just the power of geospatial data, almost, it's all like the picture that says 1,000 words, isn't it?
Oh, completely. I mean, that's the difference between geographic to geospatial, really, right? Is the difference of just straight numbers and looking at the world from a purely statistics way to realizing that we're experiencing the 1,000 words. We live our lives in stories, right? And so what we found effective in our common operational picture was actually sharing the story of the risk with our commander so that he could decide what he needed to do for his next action. And honest to goodness, I think that's whenever you and I are probably figuring out how we're going to map ourselves to go somewhere on a journey, that's the same thing that we're doing. We're developing, okay, what's the story of what's happened and what's the story I'm about to do?
Yeah. Well, we started the day talking about how things have changed, and today you take this device and you type in hospital, and it tells you what the closest one is, and that's a very different experience from seeing a list of hospital addresses. Remarkable stuff that you've accomplished. I want to thank Marie Kennedy. She is now with the San Diego Fusion Center. She was formerly with Joint Task Force Homeland Defense, and Mike Evanoff of Google. Thank you both for doing this. Really remarkable job. And a reminder, if we didn't cover something that we should have, Marie and Mike, Mike and Marie. I keep thinking like Donnie and Marie, but of course, she's a little bit country. He's a little bit rock and roll. I don't know who's rock and roll, but they're going to be in our virtual conference center, and you can chat with them and ask them your own questions and do whatever you. And a reminder that this and all of our sessions today are available on demand. God, we've had some great ones. We've talked about to National Archives about going to the cloud and how that has really just created all sorts of collaboration platforms to do things in different ways. Automated performance reviews. My goodness, how cool is that? All of them will be available on demand on the Google Federal YouTube page. And since you registered, we'll send you the link, and you can watch them all for yourself. One other reminder that there's a survey. We'd love to hear what you thought of this event. Even the moderator, you can even comment on me. Let us know. The survey is at the bottom of the page right there. But one more session coming up. We're going to talk to Google's Mike Bradshaw get some final thoughts about as we piece all these different segments together and talk about what it all means to help you do your job better. That's just ahead on Innovation for the Nation. Marie and Mike, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for hanging out.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.